The United Nations says by the end of 2014, more than 60 million people were forced to flee their homes, the biggest displacement of people ever recorded. Sameh and his family fled war in Syria. They were rescued from a boat in the Mediterranean this week and taken to Italy.
Every human on this planet loves their country, but the situation in Syria would force anyone to look for safe shelter in a safe country, for themselves, for their wife, for their children.
More than 100,000 migrants have crossed the Mediterranean to Europe this year. Nearly 2,000 have died. Europe's crisis is far from the full picture, says UN High Commission for Refugees spokesman Andrej Mahecic.
The Mediterranean is only perhaps the visible consequence of what we are seeing globally. Let's not forget that 86% of the world's refugees are hosted by the developing nations. For example, Syria has been the single largest driver of displacement over the past 4 years. Most of the Syrians have found refugees in the neighboring countries, nearly 4 million of them.
Syria's neighbours, like Turkey, are trying to stem the flow of refugees. They have received little support from the international community, says Anna Shea of Amnesty International.
In Lebanon, 1 in 5 people is now a refugee. In Turkey has the largest Syrian refugee population at over 1.7 million people. So in the face of this massive influx of people in a short amount of time, countries are really resorting to troubling measures.
The group describes Africa's refugees as the world's forgotten crisis. There are more than 3 million in sub-Saharan Africa.
What's really striking is that a lot of countries are both the source and destination for refugees. So countries that are persecuting people and where people are suffering human rights abuses are themselves welcoming refugees because there's nowhere else for these people to go.
Shea says the inadequacy of the global response was highlighted last month as thousands of ethnic Rohingya refugees from Myanmar were left drifting in the Andaman Sea for weeks because no country would accept them. Indonesia and Malaysia have now offered temporary resettlement. The UN's Mahecic says the world is entering a dangerous era in which the humanitarian response is dwarfed by the scale of the refugee crisis.
Over the past 5 years, 15 conflicts erupted in various parts of the world, 8 of them in Africa alone, 3 in the Middle East, just to name Syria, Iraq, Yemen, another one in Europe, Ukraine. This unprecedented displacement requires an unprecedented response.
Mahecic says the only long-term hope is a political solution, but many of these conflicts are intensifying and the number of people forced to flee for their lives continues to grow. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.